Okay, so good morning, fifth grade. Here today we're going to be studying our first lesson on navigation. As you can see here up in the left hand corner, we have a word called topographical maps, and we're going to read together, and I'd like you to follow along with your finger. As I read the words, you're going to follow along with your finger to practice reading comprehension. Topographical maps. These maps show contour lines and landforms. So let's start with contour lines. These contour lines are here. And this word contour actually comes from the same word in Spanish, which is contorno, which is what we are going around the perimeter of the change in elevation of a certain land feature. Now you can see there's a woman here who's looking at a map, and then she's looking out over what she sees. Now, what we're trying to do here is to understand the relationship between these lines and the natural features that we see when we're walking around nature. And if you come across a map, you see all these lines, but you don't really know how to read it. It's just like words. I know this says landmark, and I know so this says spotting, choosing the best route. I know how to read these words because I understand the letters and the code and the language, which is English. Now the lines are communicating a different language. That language is the language of topography or topographical maps. Each contour line on a map joins up points where the ground is the same height. Now this is important. I know that if there's a circle here, this ground is the same height. And I know if there's a circle here, this ground is the same height. Another circle, this ground's the same height. Now they tried to show you how 2 dimensions can be converted into 3 dimensions as shown in this landmass. You see there's light blue lines that are completely mirroring this 2-dimensional contour line. Lines close together mean that there is a steep slope. So for example, if we compare the right side of the contour lines to the left side of the contour lines, we can see that these lines are much closer together. The space between this line and that line, and the space between this line and that line, are much closer than the space between here and here, or here and there. Now, what this means is, just as you see on this natural feature, this is much flatter than this right side. See, as the lines come closer together, the hill goes down very quickly. So we're able to understand how to read a map or the contour lines when we're walking around nature. We're able to look at a map and see that if the lines are very far apart, as we see in this map, that means that she's going to be able to walk along this landscape without having any trouble. Where here, the lines are very close. So I think that
Daddy,
perhaps...
I need to use this for a moment, okay?
Okay. I think that perhaps she would have trouble going down this part of the mountain or hill. And perhaps if she's walking around, she might choose to use this gradual route that goes down.
Daddy.
Now, we could see that lines close together mean that there is a steep slope. So we see here, steep slope, these lines are close together. While lines that are far apart indicate that flat ground or a gentle slope is ahead. So this is the first session about topography or navigation, which is teaching us how to read a map, how to navigate a map. which we will have to do later in this project, and perhaps next term we will be able to talk about it more. But this is the first introduction to topographical maps and navigation. Now, let's turn the page. Now on this page we can see several examples side by side of how the map topographical contour lines look in comparison to a three-dimensional image. So, for example, types of landscape that we can find in the countryside, we will notice that there are many different types of landscape. We have a gentle slope, we have a steep slope, we have concave slope, we have a convex slope, okay? This has to do with the shape of the lines, okay? If the lines are going this way, you can see the shape of the lines. If the lines are going that way, we can see the shape of the lines. Now, just by looking above, we're not able to tell if the slope is concave or convex just by looking at a map. That we would have to look in the actual area. Next page. Now here's a very important aspect of mapping and of navigation. Now, take this example of a cliff. We would like to avoid cliffs if we're in nature. Do not ever want to pick a route that is going over a cliff. So if someone sees this image, they might say, oh, well, I can go from here to here without a problem. Look, it's only 1 kilometer. However, you're not able to use that because, as you know, if we jump off the cliff, we will be either very injured or dead. So, for example, we see these contour lines are somewhat close together. This is the same height, but all of a sudden these lines come off to a very fine point, which means that we've come up to a cliff. Now, here we have another example. It's called a saddle. A saddle has 2 hills that go down. As we see, this is contour lines. They're very close together. And then here we have a lot of space in between, which means that it's flat. So here we go up, we go down, and then back up again. The idea of this lesson is to understand that the lines, depending on if they're close together or if they are far apart, are communicating to us the language of topography or the language of navigation, which means that this 2-dimensional feature is going to be expressed in 3 dimensions in our everyday lives in nature. Of course, you have gillies or spurs, but those are all just, they're all just versions of saddles, gillies and spurs. We have valleys. A valley, you can see the contour lines here, all converging into a little, where a river would be. Let's turn the page. Now here, we're going to end our study today of Introduction to Navigation and Topography with we're going to look at 2 things right now, symbols and scales. So a symbol is, as you understand just in Spanish, símbolo is a use of lines or different geometrical shapes to communicate a language, to communicate some type of message. So here you can study the symbol for campsite. Repeat, campsite, motorway, motorway, railway, railway, railway station, railway station, river, river, school, school. Now here we have a little cross and a circle, which is place of worship. Place of worship like a church or a mosque or a temple. Post office. And here we have woods. Now let's go over to scales. Scales, I'll read this a little bit more in detail. Here we have scales. Scales are maps. Scales are always on maps. Maps are made to scale, which means that A map is very small in comparison to the real life nature of a landscape or reality. Maps are made to scale so that the distance between landmarks and places in real life is shown accurately on paper. It is very different that the map, it is very important that the map is correct so that the features are where the map reader expects. The scale also helps us to work out distances. I think this is the most important thing for us if we want to survive in nature, if we want to navigate, if we want to go on long distance hikes or trips with our family. We want to be able to correctly calculate distances. Most maps have a scale written on them. For example, 1 to 50,000. This means that 1 centimeter, this, on a map, equals 50,000 centimeters on the ground. Here we have a small scale. A scale is shown visually on a map in both centimeters and inches. In this example, the diagram shows a map with a scale of 1 to 100,000. In this case, every 1 centimeter on the map is equal to 1 kilometer on the ground. So if we return to our example before of the other map, imagine, let's take this scale and let's go return to where we were looking. Now, if I take, for example, my pinky finger is more or less 1 centimeter. So if we go back to the map we were looking at the introduction, imagine that this map, it has a scale of 1 to 100,000, which means that my pinky is 1 kilometer. So imagine that you say, okay, well, I'm here on the map, and I know that 1 centimeter, which is more or less my pinky finger, is 1 kilometer. I can calculate how long it will take me to get there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about from here to here could be 5 kilometers. This is an example. It's an oversimplification, but you understand. Okay, everyone. Well, that's the end of our introduction to topography and navigation. I will be seeing you next week to advance our study of latitude. In next week, we're going to look at latitude. Next week, we're going to look at coordinates, latitude and longitude, north and south. And we're going to start talking about things like finding our direction and navigating with the sun and the moon.